Hello and welcome to, assuming YouTube will actually let me title it this, How Many People Did You Kill in Miami, you sick freak? I'm a huge fan of the Hotline Miami franchise, and the last time I played it, I asked myself this very dumb question, and then I decided that I'm not allowed to sleep until I figure out the answer. But before we get into all this, let's lay down some ground rules. First things first, I'm going to assume if you're watching this video, you have a basic understanding of the story, and I'm not going to explain a lot of it. If you don't understand it, go play these games, they're great. Second thing second, again, I'm assuming at this point YouTube will let me title the video the way I want it. Yes, we are going to talk about Hawaii, I just wanted a really dumb title. Third thing, to make this even more difficult on myself, I've decided to also separate by enemy types. So we'll have Russians, heavies, dogs, cops, etc. Final rule is, we are only counting actual physical killings, meaning stuff like this and this will not be counted because our player character doesn't actually kill them. Now I figured the easiest way to break all this down is to go by characters, so we're going to start with the character with the lowest amount of kills and work our way up to the character with the highest amount. Pretty easy, right? Well, the problem with these games is there are some, shall we say, unreliable narrators all over the state. So some things aren't going to count because what we're seeing either A, isn't really happening, or B, is non-canon. Yes, we are going to get into discussions of canon. You might not agree with what I think is canon, and that's fine because I did all the math regardless. So I'll walk through what we have to explain, but for the most part we'll have actual kills and then we'll have technical kills. I'm also going to work in some little mini theories or questions I have regarding these certain characters because I just really like talking about Hotline Miami, and this seemed like the perfect outlet for that. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our first killer. Martin Brown, the actor, is at the very bottom of the list with a grand total of 0 confirmed kills. Now yes, technically he kills 5, I'm assuming these are supposed to be high schoolers, it's not really clear, along with 33 cops, 1 detective, and 1 very overzealous SWAT officer, giving him a nice round 40. This is Midnight Animal, a movie, and nobody really dies in movies. Anyway, moving on. The only real question I have for Martin and everything that just kinda happens around him is, who thought this movie was a good idea? I hate to immediately get serious about this, but regardless of how you count his kills, Martin will always be at the bottom of the list, and I really hate to compare video game events to real life events because we all know that never plays out well. But when thinking about Martin and Midnight Animal, I'm stuck thinking about Jeffrey Dahmer. Stick with me here, I promise I'm going somewhere. For those of you that have been living under a rock, Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer in Wisconsin who was convicted in 1992. Remember that, that'll be important for later. He's pretty well known, and to be entirely honest, I don't want to talk about the specifics of what he did, but he's famous enough to get documentaries and books written about him. But the one I want to talk about specifically is the Netflix show Dahmer. Now, while Dahmer was considered a success for the most part, the reviews were kind of mixed, mostly in part due to some of the events that happened in the show didn't play out like they did in real life. People also felt that this drama show glorified Jeffrey's life, and then, of course, the victims of the families obviously felt re-traumatized having to relive this very horrible thing that happened to them as people just sort of sat around and enjoyed the show. Now, I can't really say this next part without sounding like a horrible person. I have tried to figure out how to write this, but let me just apologize in advance and let me say that everybody heals differently, and the family members of these victims have every right to feel hurt and offended by the Dahmer show. However, Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted in February of 1992, and the Dahmer show on Netflix came out in September of 2022, a little over 30 years later. So there has been some time for these people to grieve. Now, how does this connect to Hotline Miami? Well, Jacket's final kill happens on July 23rd, 1989, and while we can't really tell when Midnight Animal was made, as they are the only 2 levels in the sequel that are not dated at all, this newspaper, which criticizes the film, can be found at the start of Into the Pit, which takes place on December 9th, 1991. So more likely than not, Midnight Animal came out on the 6th, because it's the Friday before, but that's still barely over 2 years after Jacket's arrest. Hell, Jacket's still on trial for his crimes, and someone has decided to make a film that dramatizes these events and doesn't stick to the facts? Who thought this was a good idea? Who funded this? This is just where my brain goes sometimes. Hopefully this is the craziest we get, even though we have just started, and hopefully I don't have to get any more serious from here. Evan Wright, the writer, I guess actually starts our list off with a much more successful 1 confirmed kill. Evan Wright is a pacifist, and while you can break him down and just start killing people, that's not really how he's designed to be played. Yes, he does knock out 76 thugs, 27 Russians, and 1 very annoying idiot with a lead pipe, giving him a total of 104. These are all knockouts, except for this guy, who he kills completely by accident. I mean, he even tries CPR on a man whose head he just exploded. Heck, you don't even need to fight any of the Russians upstairs. If you can just book it to Petrov's sauna, you're golden. Also, he does knock out an additional 45 thugs in the Abyss level, which technically gives him a total of 149. This entire level is completely non-canon, and we'll get into why that is a little later. I don't have any questions for Evan, his story is pretty clear cut, but I will say his ending will always be him choosing the typewriter over his family, because nobody here gets to have a happy ending. Up next is the Henchman, loyal to the Sun and the Russian Mafia, and only 2 days away from... Oh, he's actually retiring today? Good for him. But he's got 1 last job to do, and 40 thugs and 3 dogs later giving him 43, and that's really it. He gets to go home with a duffel full of cash and live out his days with his girlfriend and... Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Really makes you think about how all these faceless Russians have lives of their own and their own problems, huh? I got nothing left to say for him besides this scene is probably one of the sadder ones. On to everybody's favorite hacker man is Biker, who has some questionable kills, but not too many we need to worry about. 31 Russians, 2 dogs, and 19 phone home workers gives him a total of 52. The only ones we can't count are the jacket fight, because obviously, and we can't count these janitors here because these guys are also these guys. Biker's a pretty mysterious dude, what with his not at all explained hacking abilities and seemingly strange disposition towards 50 blessings. He claims he just got bored and wants out of killing people, but how exactly do you get bored of that? I know the real reason is because he gets the sense there's a political agenda, which is why he calls out on clean hit, but that's the lie you're gonna tell people, is that you got bored? You clearly got into this to kill people. You're not even getting paid. But the way more interesting question I have for Biker is, what desert? In this scene, which is admittedly not canon, he talks about driving out of Miami and into a desert. Here's a map of the United States of America where the deserts are. Man, whatever he found on those computers must have scared him pretty bad to go that far. I'm gonna separate the fans killing a little bit before adding them up all together at the end. We're gonna operate how the game wants you to play, so everyone gets their 1/4 of Death Wish, and then Corey's gonna get Down Under, Tony's gonna get Moving Up, Alex and Ash will get Execution, and Mark will get Into the Pit. So that means Corey stomps out 17 thugs, 19 Russians, 2 heavies, and 2 dogs, giving her 40. Tony pounces 34 thugs, 18 Russians, 3 heavies, and 2 dogs, giving him 57. Alex and Ash gracefully execute 29 thugs, 20 Russians, 2 heavies, a dog, and they're gonna take credit for the henchmen since it's their level, giving them 53, and Mark rips apart 27 thugs, 20 Russians, 3 heavies, and 9 dogs, ending out at 59. Throwing all that together gives the fans 107 thugs, 77 Russians, 10 heavies, 14 dogs, and the henchmen, adding up to 209 kills. No real question for the fans either, because how they got original Tony's mask out of police evidence is honestly pretty easy to answer. They're a fairly solid military group. I would imagine breaking into an evidence locker would be pretty easy. Although I am curious as to why they chose the masks they did from a thematic perspective. Mark being a bear makes sense, he's a pretty big guy, and having one person in your group who has a real mask also makes sense, but why is Corey a zebra? And why are Alex and Ash swans? I got nothing. They're all animals that are mostly from different biomes, there's no real connection amongst them. Probably just their favorite animals, I guess. I mean, that's why I got a raccoon. Jake the Snake is where we start to get a little weird with it though. Now we can definitely confirm 28 Russians and the CEO here in hard news, that's the easy part. But it's in withdrawal where it gets very iffy. Now technically, if you beat this level, that adds a hefty 44 Russians, 2 heavies, and 2 dogs, giving him a grand total of 77. And then that gives you this scene where Jake gets brought back to the 50 Blessings headquarters before being executed right after grabbing a floppy disk. This floppy disk, by the way, is what Evan finds that gives him access to the Abyss level. However, none of this is canon because when you die on the 3rd floor in Withdrawal, you don't get to start over. You get dragged out and then executed here, which is where Jacket finds you in Hot and Heavy. So his final murder count is a little hard to say. So what I did, and I swear I did not plan this, I took the final number of the top floor, which was 16, and cut it in half to make 8. Makes perfect sense, right? Well, if that's the reality that we live in, that very conveniently makes Jake's murder count 69. Nice. Now that we figured out the best number on this list, the one thing I gotta ask is, how in the heck did Jake figure this out? Just how? The man barely understands how pre-recorded phone messages work, and yet he's the one who figures out the entire operation 50 Blessings is pulling off in the middle of a single conversation. Biker at least hacked into computers and got access to classified documents and who knows what. But the fact that Jake just figures out the whole scam based on this single conversation tells me that either A, this dude is way more nervous than his sprite suggests, or B, Jake is just really good at reading people somehow. How he figured out 50 Blessings' entire agenda, I will never know. Manny Pardo is a crooked cop who doesn't play by the rules. He's also got an insanely high kill count even for a cop protagonist in the 90s. Now, if we want to get technical, Manny ends up killing 78 Colombians, 30 cops, 20 thugs, 7 gangster heavies, 3 detective heavies, 7 Miami mutilator murders, which we can prove from this newspaper, which happens after this body, and then add up these 2 other murders, 6 dogs, a puppet, and Tony the Tiger, giving him 153. We can't count anything that happens in COD because it's just a nightmare that he's having, so we gotta bump a couple of those kills off and give him 118. Now as for Manny, I can't help but wonder why he desires fame the way that he does. What could drive a man to murder people in such a violent way so that you could maybe be famous? I have an idea. I believe that Manny was one of the detectives after the masked maniac, and as such, he was probably interviewed quite often about the case. Then when they finally caught Jacket, nobody really cared about the police perspective anymore. This mysterious masked murderer is a veteran. He's probably decorated, and with some exception, he only seemed to kill Russian criminals. He was hailed as a vigilante, and that probably honestly would have continued if not for the police members he kills in assault. But with a story like that, who'd care about a police officer who, argumentatively, was just doing his job? He hates that Jacket, who to him is just some mindless, degenerate sociopath, is almost hailed as a hero by the people. If he can get so much support, so much fame just mindlessly killing Russian criminals, well, why couldn't he? After all, he's seen some crazy stuff on the force. He could probably pull something more sophisticated and thought-provoking, couldn't he? Leader of the Ghost Wolves, Lieutenant Beard is a brave soldier fighting the good fight against the USSR in Hawaii, and his kill count shows it. Across his tour in Hawaii, Beard nets 143 USSR soldiers and 11 heavies, getting him 154 confirmed kills. I don't really have much to say about Beard. His story is pretty simple. Man goes off to war, goes home, and lives out his dreams of owning a store. I just wish that dream could have lasted longer, but you know what they say about good times. What can I say except never trust a rat? Which is ironic because Richter's intentions are actually pretty noble. He's not working for 50 Blessings because they're threatening him. He's working for them because they threaten his mom and he wants to protect her. He's not in this for the glory or even saving his own skin. It's always been about her. After every mission he gets sent out on, the first thing he does when he gets home is check on his mom. Really makes you wonder why he chose a rat mask. But across his career with 50 Blessings and then his getting fired, he assassinates 84 Russians, 7 heavies, and 5 dogs, along with 31 prisoners and 35 guards during the riot/escape. Why do I feel like I'm Oh right. Never trust a rat. Along with the girlfriend, total kills amount to 163. Richter's cold-blooded, that's for sure. But the one thing I don't get is, how does Jacket recognize him? I mean, when he sees him during all these scenes, that's before we actually see him without his mask and assault. So what's the story there? It's possible Richter was in Hawaii, but if so, where was he? He's not with the fans or the ghost wolves at the bar. I think if anything, Richter had to have bumped into him someplace else. Maybe in the real version of this bar or this pizza place, and he just recognized his voice. I'm not entirely certain, but something about Richter being former military just doesn't feel right to me. But I'm not sure what else it could be. His mom says he was a good kid, so he couldn't be the punk who grew up with the wrong crowd. I'm just not sure about him, but a rat's always gonna be a rat. I'm gonna be honest, Sun sucks. At least for the purpose of making this video, Sun was the worst character. During my original recording, Seizure somehow ended up looking so dark I couldn't count anything. Blood Money has just enough different character types that I probably counted over these sections 7 or 8 times. Takeover is just unbelievably difficult for me regardless of the class I pick, and in Apocalypse he's high the entire time. How can we confirm anything? Is this real? Does this count? Did he maybe actually own a real bear and killed that?
I don't fucking know. You could glean anything from that?
But I counted what made the most sense. So across the board we have 106 Colombians, not counting anybody in this room because he doesn't actually pull the trigger. Did he plan it? Absolutely. But he didn't kill anybody, so the blood's not on his hands here. He also has 39 bank guards, 16 heavies, 15 dogs, 11 Russians, 2 bank tellers, a bear, a zebra, and a double-headed swan hydra. Now obviously, yes, these are the fans, and even though he does shoot Tony, he doesn't die until now. After all that insanity, we gotta give Sun the grand total of 193. I ain't got nothing to say about him other than he's a deranged nutcase and has to be at the top of the list. I mean, surely, nobody else could have killed more than... Wait a minute. Jacket. He's a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. A man who in the span of a few short months managed to cripple the Russian mafia almost single-handed. It's no surprise he's at the top of the list. But before we get to the numbers, I want to talk about what could possess a man to go to these lengths. Sure, he was being coerced, I suppose, but Jacket barely got any threats. He answered the calls and went off and killed a ton of people, but why? It all goes back to that question. That infamous question that's been joked about and memed on by this community since October 23rd, 2012. The question that is so well known, I'll bet some of you have even said it out loud while listening to this. Do you like hurting other people? And the answer, of course, for Jacket is no. Wait a minute. No? John, you wrote no. What? Now before we all run to the comments section, let me explain because I have evidence to back this up. Let's run it back to Decadence, where after killing a later explained amount of Russians and this guy who's called the producer, Jacket decides to investigate the back room that was previously locked. He finds a woman crying, clearly showing signs of physical abuse and possibly forcibly drugged. More likely than not, these TVs on the right are linked up to security cameras. She saw what he did and says, "I knew it would end like this." And what does he do? He picks her up gently and carries her home. She decides to live with him and somehow, someway ends up falling in love with him as he goes off murdering Russians in a chicken mask. Truly a sick but kinda sweet love story? But let's take a minute to think about this logically. This is a woman who has seen what he's done and his first thought for whatever reason is to take her to his house and then take his mask off. She could very easily turn him in and for whatever reason she doesn't, but that's still a huge risk for him to take. Surely the safer option would have been to kill her, and if Jacket likes hurting other people, this would not be a big deal. She's literally accepting the fact that she will die. It'd be easy. But okay, maybe that doesn't convince you, so let's go even further back. Back to the Metro. After his first mission, Jacket goes to drop off this briefcase, and as he leaves, he's stopped by a bum fighting to protect his territory. Jacket dispatches him quickly, but before he makes it back to his car, he rips off his mask and vomits. It's a fairly natural response, sure, you just killed a man in cold blood. No, I don't think Jacket likes hurting other people. Caveat to that is, Jacket doesn't see Russians as people. Now stick with me here, cause we're gonna get a little more complicated, but we gotta go even further back. Back to Hawaii. I think when Jacket and Barnes get hit with this elevator explosion and Jacket later gets flown out, he's suffering from some unnoticed head trauma. It probably messes up his emotions, maybe he gets quicker to anger, and that's why he's having this conversation with Beard about an alleged breakup. Then Beard, his best friend and emotional support, dies. He's the only ghost wolf left. After that, who knows what happens in between the San Francisco bombing and April the 3rd. Somehow, someway, he ends up getting involved in 50 Blessings and they decide to send him out. Sure, why not? Whatever gets him out of the apartment at this point. Probably just some dumb prank or something. But then he gets to the metro and it's real. He's gonna have to fight, what, some Russian gangsters for a briefcase? And as he walks into that building, something in him just snaps. He's back in Hawaii, but he's all alone. No Barnes, no Daniels, and no Lieutenant. The Russians took them away from Jacket. The Russians bombed San Francisco. And the Russians will take away everything from him if he lets them. So he flies into a blind rage. He doesn't even see it as killing Russian mafia members, he's eliminating the enemy on the beaches again. Now sure, when you play the game, you're gonna die probably a couple hundred times. But canonically, Jacket pulls off all these missions on his first attempt. Combined with his military tactics and sheer will, he just barrels through relatively guarded areas. The only reason 50 Blessings decides to take him out is because he didn't kill Biker. So then they just start sending him out on more dangerous missions, hoping he won't live through it, and he does. Time and time again. They even call the cops on him at Crackdown, and then they call other mafia members on him at Deadline, and still, Jacket prevails. So they send a rat to kill a rooster, but not even death can stop him at this point. After waking up from a coma, cops clearly hot on his trail, and his girlfriend gone and probably more head trauma, Jacket becomes fully engrossed in this reality. He escapes the hospital, goes home, puts on his uniform, and heads off to war, hopefully for the last time. At this point, his mind is just too far gone. He kills an entire police precinct because his brain has convinced him they are protecting the rat, someone that the Russians had sent to kill him. He goes to kill the rat before telling him about the phone calls. Now, of course, we know Richter lives after this, but it's my personal belief Jacket did try to squeeze as much as he could, but still being weak from waking up from a literal coma on the same day he raids the police station, and Richter, being the rat that he is, just pretended to be dead in order to survive. Then Jacket decides to end it all, heads out to the club on South 86th Street, and then heads to the lair of the Russian mafia boss. If he kills him, it's all over. He'll avenge the people he cares about, and his job as a soldier is done, and he can finally go home. He storms the base, fights off 2 Panthers and his bodyguard before taking knives to a gunfight, but then the boss just kills himself, refusing to give Jacket any amount of satisfaction. And then the phone rings. Someone else is still here. Someone else who is in charge. And Jacket finds him and kills him. He successfully stopped the Russian threat, so he goes outside, removes his helmet, and smokes a cigarette as he pulls out a photograph of happier times, but then throws it away because he no longer recognizes the man in that photograph. Now then, how many targets did the masked maniac of Miami murder? From April the 3rd to July 23rd of 1989, Jacket kills 1 grandfather, 1 bodyguard, not the boss of the Russian mafia because he beats Jacket to the punch or the bullet, 2 Panthers, 1 owner, 1 police chief, 1 van man, 1 original Tony, 1 bum, 1 briefcase man, 18 dogs, 15 heavies, 3 detectives, 45 cops, and 300 Russian mafia members, giving him the grandest of totals of 391 confirmed kills. So that means in total, across gameplay, you've killed 602 Russians, 68 heavies, 65 dogs, 108 cops, 7 detectives, 243 thugs, 184 Colombians, 74 guards, 31 prisoners, 143 soldiers, 2 Panthers, 2 bank tellers, a briefcase man, a bum, an original Tony, a van driver, a police chief, a club owner, a bodyguard, a grandfather, 19 phone home workers, 1 SWAT officer, 5 kids? 1 leader, 7 Miami Mutilator murders, 1 puppet, 1 henchman, 1 CEO, Mark, Corey, Alex and Ash, New Tony, and the girlfriend, giving you a total of 1,579. But in regards to what I think is canon, we'll have to bump some of those numbers down and make the actual number 1,393 murders. And that's how many people you killed in Miami, you sick freak. But Jackson, I hear you say, what about Hotline Miami 3? No, absolutely not. But having said all that, thank y'all so much for watching. Even if you don't agree with my theories or what I personally think is canon, I hope at the very least my insane ramblings were entertaining for however long this video is. I'm not entirely sure at this point. If you want to hear me talk more about weird stuff, I stream over here sometimes. There's probably going to be a link somewhere in the description. I'd also like to thank Vicious Sneck for my PNG art and Fogel Hellcat for my profile art. Both of their links will also be in the description. And I'd like to give a final thank you to all of my friends for putting up with all this nonsense. It's been weird, I'm sure, but I thank you all a lot. Now I'm gonna go take a nap and try not to think about numbers for probably the rest of the year. So with all that, have a great rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning, as time is a very weird concept.